I call Alistair Scott.
Yeah. Mr. Chair, I'd like to speak to the bill for a few minutes. Just for a few minutes. Just for a few minutes. And specifically, and it's pleasing to see that we are generally in agreement in supporting the bill. I'd also like to pick up a point that Mr. Tabato talked about and clarify, Professor Mr. Tabato, around the active and passive, whether this bill does anything to change the active activity or passiveness of any investment that the Guardians make. The way I read this bill, there is no change. This FIV does not allow any change in the activity of investment or the type of investment that the Guardians are able to take. If you think that the power to grant a power of attorney is more activity, if you think the power to appoint an investment manager is a more active fund, or if you think the power to appoint a custodian is increasing the activity of the fund, then you're wrong. This does not increase the active management that Section 59 has and will continue to guide the Guardians of the Trust. Mr. Chair, I'd like to discuss and clarify a couple of issues around the reasons why Minister of Finance should not be involved and will not be involved in the interference of the management of this trust. And it's interesting that the particularly Labor opposition members talk about Dr. Cullen's plan to have a totally independent governance of this fund, and I totally support that notion. But then I'm surprised that the Labor guys want interference from the Minister of Finance, because as soon as you got that foot in the door, how is a Minister of Finance to react if, assuming that he was given the authority, as an example, Minister of Finance is asked to approve an investment and the investment goes bad? Whose fault is it? Is it the Guardians of the Trust, or is it the Minister of Finance's fault? If the investment goes well, who takes the credit? Is it the Minister of Finance who approved this investment, which is not passive, or is it again the Guardians of the Trust who should take the credit? Mr. Chair, this fund, as been noted already, is performing outstandingly. The top state-funded superannuation fund in the last 5 years. Mr. Chair, if we were to allow Mr. Robertson or Mr. Nash or Dr. Parker into the as a potential Minister of Finance, what would we have? What would we see? What investments would be approved by these people? Well, for a start, I can tell you there'd be a hell of a lot more going straight into their $100,000 house project, because these guys have talked about investing more into the New Zealand Stock Exchange. That is not the purpose of this fund. The purpose of this fund is to have a diversified, global, across different equity markets, across different countries, across different instruments, without the interference of any Minister of Finance. And that is why this SOP, which removes the suggestion given by the Select Committee, must be ruled out. Thank you.